Perfect. Well, I'd just like to welcome everyone that's going to listen in. So this is Biz Chats, where we have a nice dialogue with expert guests just like Chris, or receive advice, tips, and best practices. And for today's Biz Chat, we're going to be talking about how to optimize a business for a sale. And it's obviously brought to you by Value Fastlane, which is a business with proven tools and systems that can accelerate the value of your company. And I guess you're already chatting with the audience, but it's my pleasure to introduce you to Chris, who's the founder of Value Fastlane. How are you today?
Well, thank you so much, Nunzio. I'm great. I'm very excited to be here with you today. I know that Biz Chats is an exciting new initiative, and getting this off the ground is amazing. I know that you've got a huge community of entrepreneurs and business owners and other people in that ecosystem, and it's a real privilege to be able to connect with you and connect with some of them and talk about the message and just throw some value out there. I think that there's a lot of exciting ways for us to collaborate, so this is amazing to get out there and just talk about building value, optimizing businesses. It's an exciting topic.
Absolutely. I think, one thing about that we aim to do with Biz Chats is just providing insightful, meaningful conversations where, everyone sees the value and it can help them with their day-to-day. So, for example, someone listening right now that's interested in potentially setting up their business for a sale one day, this conversation is very important. So I know we carved out, an hour out of your day today, so I'm going to get right into it. I have about 10 questions that I like to ask you. So we'll go with the first one. So what are some common misconceptions that business owners have about selling their business?
Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I see on a very regular basis is the speed that it takes. Now, a lot of business owners, especially if they have a smaller business, think that it can happen very fast from when they decide to sell to when they're actually out of the business and they're sitting on a beach. And while it can happen pretty quickly like that, if you want to optimize the value of your business, you're not looking at just making it transactional like that. You really want to take more time. And what typically happens in a business is it can take up to about a year to negotiate those details, especially if you want to do things right. And a lot of businesses have some sort of an earn-out clause as well, especially as you get into larger, more sophisticated companies. And often the earn-out will require the owner to be working in the business for an average of about 3 years. So that's one thing that you see sometimes. People aren't mentally prepared to do all that and to put that kind of time in. Another big misconception is just how their business is going to be valued by the marketplace. So a lot of business owners, they know that they have a valuable company, they've got a good client base, and they've got good employees, and they've got a great track record of profit. But they're very unsure when it comes to how much this thing is actually worth in the marketplace. So I think that's something that's great to address early on. The more proactive you are with any of this, the better position you'll be put in when you go to eventually sell the business. And then the last thing is kind of related to that as well. I think that a lot of business owners, they underestimate the amount of control that they have over the value of their business. They think that it may be something like the revenue of the company or just their industry, and sort of the terms will be dictated to them. And what they might not realize is that if they take that longer window of time and they proactively do a series of things to build value, they can influence the value dramatically of the business. So, of course, things like size and industry do play a significant role in how much the business is going to be worth. When you think about just a team of acquisition specialists that work for a large company, spending their days hunting for smaller businesses to buy and fold into the larger company, it's very attractive for them to be buying a larger business because they can only do so many transactions in a year. They have to do the same due diligence and all the same stuff for each type of transaction. So they're typically willing to pay a premium for those bigger businesses. But as we'll get to probably later in our discussion, there's several other factors beyond just what industry you're in and how big your sales have been in the last couple of years that really drive the value of the business. So I think those are some of the misconceptions that I really want to help to clear up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I, even with my journey with BizOn, I noticed that as well. The individuals that are prepared mentally and from a family perspective are the ones that win and demand a higher asking price. It's all about preparation and planning. So I'm definitely aligned with your position on that.
Excellent.
The next question here is, what are the main types of buyers typically found in the marketplace?
So I think there's a few types. One buyer group that we don't talk about as much and isn't really the focus today is just internal buyers. So those could be somebody within the company, it could be a management team or the employee group. But I think for our discussion today, the focus is really more about external buyers. So who outside of the company is interested. So when I look at that, there's really two big groups that I'm focusing on. The first is what we call financial buyers, and the second is strategic buyers. And for financial buyers, these are businesses that are looking to buy another company pretty much purely for the profit. They're looking at, how much is this business going to bring in the future in terms of profit? And if we discount that back to today, how much is that worth? They're looking at, if you keep running the business the way it is right now, how much is that current, net value of the business worth? So they're great buyers. A lot of people will end up selling to them. I'd say that they probably dominate the market up there, and their focus is really going to be on things like EBITDA, multiples, and they'll go through all those numbers, which is great, very valid business valuation techniques. But the other kind is who I would really hope people aspire to try to work with, and this is the strategic buyer. So for a strategic buyer, they'll of course focus on a lot of those same metrics and the numbers, but they're not looking at what the business can do just by itself. They're looking at what the business can do if it's in their hands. So they're looking at, sort of the much more strategic view of the long-term potential for this business. So when you think about a large business, something like WhatsApp getting purchased by Facebook, or if you think about LinkedIn getting purchased by Microsoft, it wasn't just the profit numbers that year or last year that drove those transactions. You're looking at things much beyond that that really had a huge impact. It's what's the strategic value to the acquirer of using this, because typically they have much bigger plans, and this business is able to fit in and become a piece in their larger plans. So whenever somebody's looking at optimizing the value of the business, I think that you want to think about, okay, who might be a strategic acquirer for this, and how can I make this more valuable to them? And if you start thinking about things like that and looking at decisions you make through the lenses of that type of buyer, that's how you can really maximize the value a few years out.
Absolutely, and I think it's fair to say even that exists on a smaller level as well, with a lot of people, whether they're looking to buy a business for a lifestyle change or reason. As a seller, you need to understand that, or these small businesses that are looking to acquire other small businesses in order to accelerate their growth, or just eat away at the market share and become the market leader, right? Yeah, so that's great. All right, the next question we got here is, how long does it take to get a business ready to sell?
So again, this is one where you could just go out and you could put it on the market today, right? Businesses can sell very quickly, and especially if it's in an industry where there's not a lot of complexity to it, that type of thing. But I can almost guarantee that anybody that tries to go and sell the business right now is probably not going to maximize or optimize the value that they can get for it. And again, it depends on the type of shape that the business is in right now. So if someone really wants to maximize the value, it can take up to a couple of years. I think a really good thing to do is, if you're thinking about selling in the next few years, go and see what you can get for it right now. Like, that's why your platform on BizOn is a fantastic place. People can get it out there, they can get exposure. They may not be ready to fully commit to selling at this point, but they can start getting those conversations going. And they may also learn about, okay, this is what the buyers want, this is where we are right now, and this is where we need to get to maximize value. So they're going to get some really great info from doing something like that. So if somebody really hasn't tried to optimize the business yet, they may have been running it already for 30 years or even more than that. But typically it's going to take a couple of years to put everything in place. The flip side is that the time that you spend up front doing all that you'll be able to take some of that out of the earn-out time on the other end of the sale. Somebody that has done an incredible job packaging everything up was Michael Dubin. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He started a company called Dollar Shave Club. By the looks of it, I don't think you're doing too much shaving right now, Nunzio. But he started this company, Dollar Shave Club. Yep. It went viral on YouTube. He got the revenues up to about $200 million, and he got a takeout offer from Unilever for $1 billion. Yep. And they just wrote him a check, basically. And all that work that he did up front, really solidifying the business, making it into an extremely valuable company, meant that he was able to just get the check and essentially walk away. So in contrast that with a lot of smaller businesses that, let's say you own some sort of an accounting firm or an engineering firm or something like that, and someone looks to acquire the business, they have very little confidence that it's going to keep running like clockwork and you don't have a strong strategic position. They may say, we need you to stay here, and a huge chunk of the purchase price is contingent on the profits for the next 5 years, right? So it's a trade-off. You want to do that work and maximize the value, or do you just want to throw it out there and see what you can get right now?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
So,
yeah.
One story I like to tell about this is just there was a guy, a friend of a friend, and he put his house on the market. It was in a great area, beautiful house. Everything sounded great on paper, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, all that type of thing. But when he put it out there for sale on the market, he wasn't getting any offers, and it sat out there for 6 months and just crickets. And he asked the real estate agent and some of the buyers for some candid feedback about why isn't this thing moving. And the feedback he got was it's dated. Like it's just, it's the bones are good, the location is great, but it's very dated. So what he ended up doing was doing a large renovation on the house, new kitchen, new bathrooms, bringing everything up to modern standards. And then he was able to transact and move the house pretty quickly. And he kind of kicked himself at the end, because what he realized is that at the end of the day, he put all that money in and somebody else is going to enjoy all that. So I kind of think about that for business owners. Do they want to wait until the very end and then maximize value, or start doing that all the way along and run a great business in the day-to-day? So something absolutely to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually funny that you bring that up, because we launched a blog maybe a few months back that talked about even updating your business from a social perspective, branding perspective, because yes, obviously the bones of the business have to be extremely strong and valuable for a potential seller. But brand recognition and marketing and social is just as important, right? A lot of people that want to buy an existing business want to jump into something that has attention, and something that they could have an impact on right away, right? So it's funny that you say that. That's
of course, yeah. Those are great points. Like I think that's one of the things that is absolutely critical. It's that whoever's buying the business can have a very clear vision of what's going to happen to keep the thing going, right? And the social and the branding, if that's missing, then it may be up to them to really drive things, and that's not what they're going to pay a premium price for.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so next question here. So what are some of the tricks acquirers can use to catch business owners off guard?
So I think that gets back to what we were just talking about. Like what a buyer really wants to understand is, once the owner's gone and they're sitting on a beach somewhere, is this thing going to keep basically producing money? Is it going to keep satisfying clients? Is it going to keep building and growing? So, one thing that they do is something I like to call the hit by a bus test. Now, if you pass this, you're probably good. And the whole idea is, if the owner, unfortunately, were to get hit by a bus, I don't want this to happen to anybody, but do a mental experiment.
Yes, please don't.
If they were to get hit by a bus, what happens to the business? Right? Like, does it just keep? Are there teams and systems in place that it just keeps growing and taking off, and the owner it's a tragedy, but the business is fine? Or are they in the other camp where it just falls apart? Things don't happen. There's no growth. Things like that. Right? So that's an important thing to do. But in terms of specific tricks that potential acquirers may be using, one is to get a sense of this hit by a bus thing. It's juggling calendars. So if someone's coming in to take a look at the business, they may say, okay, let's meet Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And then at the very last minute, they might say, okay, we need to switch it till 1 p.m. And the reason that they might juggle calendars like that is just to see how flexible the owner is. Is the owner able to make the switch, or do they have meetings, or do they have to be at the front desk or something like that? So that's one of the things to look out for. It's a quick tell. Another really, really important one, like this is a core thing, is the vision aligned? So an acquirer might come down and sit down with the owner over a coffee or something, and they might ask them, like, what's the vision for the business? How do you plan on growing this thing? Where is it going to get to in the next few years? What are you aiming for? And the owner, really, you hope, has some very good answers for those questions. Now what the acquirer might do, if they're very serious, is they may sit down with the management team, and they may sit down with some of the key employees, and they may ask them the same question about the vision. And what you want to have ideally is you want to have a huge alignment between what the owner says, what the management team says, and what the key employees say, because you want everybody to be working around that same vision. So doing a little test there is something that an acquirer could do. They're probably not going to tell you in advance that they're going to ask these questions. They're just going to go and do it. Again, another thing they're going to want to do probably is go and talk to some customers. And not necessarily, the 3 customers that just come in, but they may say, can you get us to chat with some of your best customers? Or they're assuming you're going to give them the best customers that are going to have positive things to say. But what they're going to ask these customers is, why do you do business with this company? And there's a few different ways it can go. The best possible outcome is that the customers say, this is a fantastic company. We really love the product or service. They're doing something that nobody else in the market is doing. So that's kind of like the ideal outcome that you want. What's less ideal is if they say something like this: we love the owner. We've been doing business with Steve for 20 years, and we wouldn't consider working with anyone else because of the personal relationship with the owner. So that's really, is it the company that's valuable, or is it the owner that has all the value? That's what they're trying to sort of suss out there. And then, one other thing they may do is they may do some mystery shopping of the business. So let's say that you've got a website and a retail location or a series of retail locations. The potential acquirer may go to those retail locations and just see what it's like to be a customer. They probably would check out the website. They may try buying something from you, your product or service, so that they can really get a sense of what's it like to be a customer of this company. And one of the key things that they're going to be looking for here is, was the owner personally involved in that whole customer journey, right? You start off and they don't really have any relationship with you. They're a stranger, essentially. And they go through a series of steps, and they become one of your clients or customers. So what the acquirer wants to see is that the owner had no real role to play in that. And that means that the business is going to be much more transitionable in the future. Those are some of the tricks and tips to watch out for, right? Especially if somebody's looking at selling something in the near future. Like, try to think through and plan for all that stuff. And you're not trying to just brace yourself for the tricks. You're ultimately trying to create a very valuable company where you can just let people come in and, everything will be good.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I like that whole juggling of calendars. That's actually something very interesting, something I've never thought about. Because I think, one thing that really inspires me every day that I tell a lot of sellers is something that your mentor, John, promotes heavily, the whole Switzerland structure, right?
Exactly.
So about making sure that your business is not dependent on, one business owner, supplier, client, etc. So, no, that's awesome. Well, we'll go with the next question here. So how do you determine what a company is worth? And I think this is probably the most popular, inquiry or question we get at BizOn, probably multiple times a day.
Really? Wow. Okay. Well, I guess it's a key question, right? People want to know. So I think the thing to say to start with is that there are many methods for doing this. Like, you go to talk to, several different business valuators or brokers, and they use a range of approaches. And it's part art and it's part science. Like, if you look at the stock market, which is basically the biggest valuation engine in the world, it's changing minute by minute, right? So it just shows you that there's a lot of factors that go into determining value. But for a smaller or a medium to small business that's looking to transact, one way you can think about determining value is essentially looking at the future profits forecast for the business out into the future, and then discounting all of them back to today. So when you do that discounting, you want to adjust for the time value of money. I think anybody would agree that you'd rather have $100 today than $100 10 years from now, or it's going to be worth less. And then you also have to discount for the risk that's basically baked into the business. So if it's a one-off business, it's very small, it hasn't done any of these optimizing things we're talking about, it's much riskier. So what all this typically funnels down to for a lot of business transactions is some sort of a multiple. And the most common multiple is a multiple of EBITDA, that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that's basically like a pre-tax profit sort of number for a lot of businesses. So that's kind of how a lot of things get looked at. Again, when we talked about the strategic versus financial buyers earlier, the financial buyers will very heavily key in on all this, the financial numbers, and they're going to be looking at optimizing that, looking at what your profit margins have been, And the strategic acquirers are probably going to look a little bit more at your growth plans and how you can fit into their system. And your growth is still absolutely very, very critical. But for the strategic acquirer, where you're going to really do the best with your business, it's going to be a little bit more to do with your growth plans and how you have sort of a large untapped market there that you can't take advantage of, but that they probably can. So those are some of the methods. I know on Bizon you've got a great calculator. One of the things that I do is I can provide people with an estimate of value as well, looking at a lot of different factors. But those are some of the main methods, right? It's a multiple of profits of some part, unless you go strategic, which is the ideal, and then you might be looking at a multiple of revenues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have that quick and dirty calculator on Bizon, which is great. There's a lot of data behind it, but we always recommend for people, that's just a starting point. We always recommend that people talk to professionals to understand, what their business is worth, because when it comes down to it, whether it's overpriced or underpriced, it is a significant part of the deal. That asking price is very, very critical to the entire, deal happening or not happening. So appreciate that. So we are midway. So once again, I do want to remind everyone that today's segment is sponsored by Value Fastlane. And after we're done here, make sure you go check out Chris's site, valuefastlane.com, where you can learn a lot more about what he does and the value he can add to your business. But we'll go on to the next question here, Chris. So how do most owners know when it's time to sell? I think that's a huge question, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, thanks first for the little plug for my website. I certainly appreciate that. I'm always wanting to interact with the community. So there's a lot of reasons. Like, selling can be a pretty personal decision for a lot of people. Big ones that you hear a lot about are people wanting to retire. They want to change their lifestyle. Maybe they've been working 70-hour weeks for decades at a time, and they're ready for a change of pace. Sometimes people get burnt out, and they're not ready to do it anymore. And my hope for everyone is that they don't let it get that late in the game, because then they could be in a bit of trouble. Yeah. Another reason people may want to sell is they may want to de-risk their portfolio. So if you look at many business owners, a lot of them are really all in. Like I used to talk to these restaurant owners and who live right by me, great little restaurant, and I asked them, do you invest in the stock market, or what's your portfolio look like? Because that's sort of the world that I've spent a lot of time in, that I have a lot of affinity for. And they said, no, we don't. We lease our apartment. We don't invest anything into stocks or bonds or anything like that. Everything we make gets plowed back into the business. So at some point, a lot of people are fine with that for some amount of time, but then eventually they may want to de-risk their portfolio when they hit one of those other life events, or they've climbed the mountain as far as they can. So sure. I think, a question that buyers may ask as well, and this is critical to have the right answer, is why is it that you want to sell your business? And a lot of the time they're going to ask that in a pretty casual manner. They'll just sort of, throw it out there like, hey, so why do you want to sell? But they're masking the importance of the question. It's really an absolutely critical question. And I think that owners need to tread very carefully when they're answering that question, because if they put the wrong answer out there, it's throwing off a lot of deals when somebody says the wrong thing. So sure. I think you need to obviously tell the truth, as with anything else. But what they really want to see is, do you already have one foot out the door, and are you just going to kind of hand over this bag once you leave? And you don't want to leave them with that sense. What they really want to hear from a business owner is that you want to sell because you're looking to partner and provide, pass the business to somebody that has the ability to help them realize its full potential. So that's where you really want to go. And that's really the best reason to sell a business. It's because you've taken it as far as you possibly can, and you need that help taking it to the next level. So I think, one way that I suggest people determine when it's the right time to sell is they can look in the mirror and they can ask themselves, is there somebody out there that's willing to put more into this business than I am? Whether it's their time or their money or their energy, or do they have that strategic reason that can help them drive it higher? Because for a lot of people, their business is kind of like a baby or like another child for them. And you want what's best for it. So when you realize that somebody else could take it further, faster, then that could be time to sell, aside from those other reasons like retirement.
Sure, yeah. And I think that's, I love what you're saying, because we're definitely aligned, because one thing that I noticed as well is out the gate, communication is very important, especially from a seller perspective, because many people in general think, oh, they're selling because the business is probably doing really bad, or they're selling because there's no more potential in growing that business anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those two things are just not true at all, right? There's so many reasons why, but I think as a seller, you need to be laser focused on communicating properly and ensuring that they're not thinking about those two things, because
that's exactly right. Like, I think you're hitting a total alignment there.
Yeah.
I think you want to leave. The best way to leave a business is on the upswing, right? Like, you want growth to be hitting all-time highs. You don't want it to be stagnating. Like, I think that's one thing that a lot of business owners do, which is horrible for the value, and it ends up hurting them the most in the end, which is they basically they take their foot off the gas too early. And that means that it started to lose a lot of momentum by the time they go to sell. I just see some comments coming through here. It's because we're not getting enough sleep. We're too busy, and that's true, right? So, and that's part of the work we do. Also, it's looking at how do you structure a business so that the owner doesn't have to lose sleep, and so the owner doesn't have to do anything or everything by themselves, right? The best position for the owner is to be in more of the strategic position, being kind of the conductor or the puppet master of the business, and orchestrating everything, right? And then finding the best people and the best technology and the best systems and processes to put in place to make everything flow day to day. But that's exactly where you need to aim for with that.
No, that's perfect. So next question here, Chris. What are a few things owners can do today to make their company easier to sell in the future?
Yeah, so you mentioned my mentor, one of my mentors, John Warlow. I brought his book here, and I'm going to plug this shamelessly because I really think, I think everybody should read this book, especially if you haven't. If you have already, I'd reread it. This is the first thing I'd say about that. How can you make the company easier to sell? Start building up the value of the company. Read a book like that and start putting in place all the stuff that it says to do. Another great book is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, another fantastic book. What I think you want to do is you want to look at the business and compare it to some of the masters of value creation out there. So some companies that I think are incredible at creating value would be some companies like McDonald's and Walt Disney and Starbucks. Because with companies like this, you get a consistent experience no matter where you go. That's why they have loyal customers that keep coming back time after time after time throughout the years. They're also able to be, multi-billion-dollar companies on the stock market. A lot of them have many locations. They can franchise. If you can see a Mickey Mouse all over the world. Same thing with a Big Mac. So you don't need to become these companies, obviously, but take away some of the lessons from them, the standardization and the process. So the whole idea, like the essence of what I'm getting at there, is that you want your company to be able to thrive without you, the owner. And the way you can start doing that today is start by documenting some of your key policies and procedures. There's a lot of business owners that it's all in their head, and that means it's very hard to sell, whether you're trying to sell it in a couple months or a couple years. Make sure that all your HR documents are in order. If you've got a method that really works for bringing in new business, you want to make sure that that's documented as well, because that's one of the pieces of secret sauce of your business. Another thing that business owners can start doing is looking at ways to have recurring revenue come into the business, because the revenue quality for a business is a huge factor determining how easy it's going to be to sell and how much it's going to sell for as well. One thing that I've seen is, just as one example out there, is companies that sort of sell home security products. So an example would be one company A, makes $1 million a year, and what they're doing is installation. So every time somebody wants to have a new installation when they get a house, they're going to come and they're going to do the installation. And then company B, they do the installations, but they also do the monthly servicing and monitoring. And they've also got this growth plan about trying to do something in terms of video, because they see what's happening with the internet. Sure. So they might both be making $1 million a year, The company that just does the one-off installations, one and done, that's it, their value is going to be significantly lower than the company that's got that subscription revenue and also has this unplowed field where they're looking forward and they say, you know what, we have all these other things, we're really looking at our customer relationships, we understand where they need to go, where the technology's going, and we've got this big plan that we're gonna get through there. So those are a few things. A couple more big ones to think about are measuring your customer satisfaction. Yep. So any owner that isn't doing that right now, that doesn't basically have a graph or a chart over time that shows what's happening with their customer satisfaction, I would urge them to go and figure out a way to start doing that today. It's never too soon to start that. And if you have some sort of a binder that you put together when you're trying to sell your business, you want to make sure that you can show how some of these things have happened. So one of the best methodologies for doing this that I've seen is the Net Promoter Score. You can definitely, I recommend anyone just Google that. It's pretty easy and cheap to implement, and it can be extremely valuable to have. And then one of the last things is you talked about before not being too dependent on any of your customers, employees, or suppliers. So do a quick analysis, right? Is there a weakest link there that you need to worry about? So that's some of the stuff. We've talked about having a plan for growth, but those are some things that people can start doing today that will really help make their company a lot easier to sell in the future.
Yeah, and you know what? And I think what especially as a seller, you need to understand that when someone's looking to buy your business, they're not buying it for today. They're buying it for future potential and whatnot. So showcasing that, like for example, company B that you explained versus company A, company B did a great job at showcasing the future, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So next question here is, okay, this is interesting. It's broad, but I think it's really important to, I guess, target the answer. So when it comes down to it, what makes a company valuable?
Right. So we've kind of danced around a lot of this.
Yeah.
But this is something that I feel like I'm in a great position to shed some light on, because this is what I do, and the work that I've done with John Warlow and that team, it's really all centered on building company value. So what they've done is they've analyzed thousands of businesses and thousands of offers to really break apart what is it that drives the value of a company. And what they found is that there are really these 8 big drivers of value. So one thing that I do with people is I create a report that basically shows, okay, this is like a health check of your business, and this is where you score on each of them. So those things, it looks at a lot of the stuff we've already talked about, right? We've been talking about it, but it's your financial performance, the growth potential, how much concentration you have on your customers, suppliers, employees. It looks at what's happening with your valuation. So, do you take a lot of cash in every month, or you have to push cash out into a huge inventory, something like that? What is the quality of your revenue? Is it recurring? So all these things are adding up to systematically drive the value of your company.
Sure.
You talked a little bit before about your marketing strategy. So one thing that Buffett looks at is, Warren Buffett, the investor, is there a moat around your company? Kind of like a medieval type thing. If your company is a castle, do you have a deep and wide moat around your company? Or is it something that somebody else can just come in, do you have no way to differentiate yourself in the market? We talked about customer satisfaction, and then the last one is just the ability of the owner to remove themselves and have things keep on humming along. So it's a combination of all those things. Those are the big drivers of value. And when you look at all that stuff in aggregate, that's what makes a really valuable company.
Yeah, and I think that in summary, if someone's looking for a short, simple answer to how you could build value, a valuable company, I guess the answer is, it's not short or simple. There's all these different types of drivers that, a business owner really has to be focused on in order to build a valuable business, but also a sellable business, right? Because, if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? Right? So
yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I kind of think of it in a very simplistic way as looking at, baking some really good cake.
Yeah.
Like you might say you want to bake a nice chocolate cake or something like that. It's important to have all the ingredients, and you miss one of those things. Like obviously, everybody would say, well, hey, if you miss the cocoa powder, you're not going to have chocolate, and that's obvious, right? And you know
Sure.
you got to put in the sugar and the eggs. But what about something a little bit more subtle, like the baking powder, right? So I think a business is like that, and that's exactly right, like you said, that if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But you miss one of those things, and sometimes what you don't know and what you aren't focused on can hurt you, especially when it comes to the value of a business. So
Sure.
yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but if you do hit all those things right, then you have something that's incredibly valuable.
And I think it's extremely important too, especially for a seller that is, dependent on this sale to fund their retirement, right? Every dollar does matter, right? So thinking about it is extremely important.
Well, for sure. And just on that point, like this kind of gets to one thing that we talked about before. Say that you have $1 million in sales. You could ask a business owner, what's more important, to increase the value of your sales by 20% or to increase your multiple by a certain, a couple points. And when you start doing the math on that, especially if somebody has had the business for a long time, they may be able to harvest significantly more value by increasing the multiple. Yeah. Because every dollar in sales can be quite expensive to build sometimes. You may have to increase the infrastructure, the number of employees, and then depending on your profit margin, that's going to filter down eventually and get to the profits. And then Exactly. It gets multiplied by some value. But if you do some of this other stuff that we've been talking about, it takes all of the value that you have and it leverages all of your profit, and that can add up to be a much more significant amount. So you're right. Like, I think both of us care a lot about people retiring with enough. And for business owners, the business is what's going to, fund that retirement. So the more work they do up front, the better time they're going to have.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we got a couple minutes left here. We got a few more questions, so I'm going to fire through them with you. So, second last question here, Chris. How do some owners sell for a multiple of revenue while most only sell for a multiple of profit?
Okay, so that really gets back to what we were talking about before, and that's really about the strategic versus the financial buyer. I don't think a financial buyer typically is ever going to pay a multiple of revenue for a company. They're only going to be paying multiples of profit. So the way to really hit that out of the park, like with Dollar Shave Club or some other examples, would be really to find that strategic acquirer. And when you find them, or sometimes they find you, the key thing that you need to be able to do is influence them to sort of have a conversation with themselves. And what they're going to do almost all the time is they're going to go back to their boardroom, and they're going to, the senior people are going to sit down and they're going to ask this question: would it be cheaper and easier to buy this company or to just build it ourselves? And what you really need them to say and to agree on wholeheartedly is that it makes a lot more sense for them to buy you out. So once they've made that decision, they see that growth plan, like they see that, okay, you've got this huge untapped potential. You might have basically a field that hasn't been plowed yet, and it's going to make a lot more sense for them to buy you. Then the numbers become a lot more appealing for the seller. So a quick example of that was a company called Breedlove and Associates, and it was sold by this woman who's an entrepreneur named Stephanie Breedlove. And what she did was she built up a company that provided payroll services for nannies. And she built this company up to doing about $9 million in sales. And if you think about a typical profit margin on there, she might make a couple $1 million a year. So that might be worth, a decent amount. Like a $9 million company is still pretty significant. But what she did was she didn't sell it to somebody just for a multiple or for profits, like 4 times profits or something like that. She went and she found this large company called Care.com, and they had, 1 million plus users buying diapers and buying all kinds of baby supplies. And she went to them and she explained to them that her beautiful little system that she created that had about 10,000 customers could be spread over their 1 million strong plus customer base. And by doing that, and even getting some small percentage to convert, they could multiply the value of the company several times over. Yeah. So she successfully made that pitch about the growth potential, and they ended up buying her $9 million company for about $55 million.
Wow.
So I think that's, you can look it up on the internet, you can Google it, Stephanie Breedlove and Associates, but that's the kind of thing that owners need to do. If they want to look at selling for a multiple of revenue as opposed to just profit, you need to have some really compelling growth or some strategic advantage. Again, looking at the stories of WhatsApp or Instagram or things like that, like these are big, well-known companies. Yeah. But there's something huge you can do. And I do think that smaller companies can do that as well, but they need to be looking ahead. They need to look at who might be buying their company. It's probably going to be a company that's maybe 5 to 25 times larger than they are right now. And that company would want to pick them off because they're a strategic asset and they can either help them do something they couldn't do otherwise, or they can help them grow. Like the board of directors for most slightly larger companies looks at growth that's going to at least beat the stock market, maybe 15% growth every year. So they have this continual need to keep buying companies and fitting them into their ecosystem just to hit their annual goals. So, look at the strategic sense.
Yeah, for sure. So last question here, Chris, is how can owners get help optimizing their business? And I think I know what the answer is.
Yeah, well, I think you do too, right? This is me talking a little bit about some of the stuff I do. But again, the first thing I'd say is go out and grab a copy of Built to Sell, read it. If you like the philosophy and you want to optimize your business value, you need to start doing some of that work. So if you think that you can do it by yourself, I urge you to go and just start. Another thing I'd say to do is start talking to your accountant as soon as possible about the personal tax implications of selling your business, because you want to understand that. And another thing I would urge people to do is come and talk to somebody like myself. You mentioned my website, valuefastlane.com.
Yep.
What I do is I specialize in helping business owners to optimize the value of their company. So I'm always open to having a conversation with people. There's a lot of stuff that you can do early on. And one of the biggest things I'd say is don't get complacent with the day-to-day. You want to take this by the reins and start doing the work as soon as possible, because the earlier you start, the more compounding you're going to have, and you're just going to run a more valuable business as early as possible. So, talk to me. I think you've got a lot of great resources as well. Talk to somebody like you, but read, look at stories for other entrepreneurs. I've got an email list. People can sign up on my website right on the homepage, get a free white paper that talks about ways to create recurring revenue. And I think it's getting engaged, it's getting into the learning process and going for it. So those are some of the things I'd recommend they do right off the bat.
Awesome. So Chris, thanks a lot. We're actually going to end this with a rapid fire. I want to do this with all my expert guests. And
amazing.
You need to answer it like right away, okay? So what's the last song you listened to on repeat?
Oh, geez. It was probably some kind of classical thing when I was writing an article, probably Mozart or something. I don't even know.
All right. What's the last meal you had?
Last meal? Well, that was my breakfast. I haven't had lunch yet. I had scrambled eggs. We made a smoothie with my wife, orange and mango.
And what was the last book you read?
Ooh, I've got one that I'm reading about fatherhood right now. I think that's something coming up in my life, which is really exciting. So I'm reading about how to be a good partner during the whole labor process, which is very exciting, and there's a lot to learn. So yeah.
Well, maybe I can give you some tips offline.
That sounds like a plan, Nunzio. I think that would be amazing.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for listening in once again, and a special thanks to you, Chris, for being our expert guest. And for sharing so much insightful advice and that I think everyone that listened in today can definitely take away and work on right away. And once again, I want to thank your company, for Value Fastlane, for making this all come together nicely. So we are hopefully recording this as well. There's a little tech issue at the beginning, but hopefully it's getting recorded now. And if it is, we will be posting this Biz Chats on BizOn's YouTube channel, so you can watch it and share it and comment on it. But make sure to tune in next week. We're going to have another Biz Chat with another expert guest. And once again, if you're interested in buying or selling a business or franchise, check out mybizon.com. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris. And have a great Wednesday.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Nunzio. It's been a pleasure being on here. And best of luck. I think this is a fantastic series, so I look forward to tuning into future editions. All right, Have a good day, everybody. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and take care. All the best.
Bye.